Hello and welcome, my name is Jasmin, I'm also known as kuschelirmel on DeviantArt, and today we're going to use these images to create an Easter type manip. This is a step-by-step tutorial, so you can follow along if you like. The resources are linked in the description, and if it's too fast, I have also added some captions on the side for you to make it easier to follow. Let's get started. Let's first choose the background image, and to get rid of the EXIF data, hit Ctrl A to select everything, Ctrl C to copy everything, then go to File New, and there you can see that it already has chosen the same dimensions as the picture. Then just click OK and Ctrl and V to paste it. Now we can add the name of the stalker as the layer name, so we can remember it later on. Even if we take weeks to finish this, we still don't need to search for the stalker's name. And then we can get rid of the original, just close it without saving. Now I'm adding the bunny, and for this I'm going to use the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool is not very precise. It will let you very quickly select your bunny by going just in and dragging the brush, dragging it over, but it will select everything around it where it sees an edge. Then you can adjust the size in the drop down and adjust your selection with the plus and the minus ones. There you also have the option to just hold down the Alt key to subtract from your selection and hold down the Shift key to add to your selection. Once you're satisfied with your selection, double click on the background layer and give it a new name to unlink it from the background. Now you can add a layer mask, and it will take the selection as its transparency mask. So just drag and drop it into the other image. Now for the positioning, I'm going to use Ctrl T. It's a shortcut for free transform to start transforming it, and as you can see at the top I have put in the linked symbol, which means that the proportions of height and width will be kept. Now I'm trying to find out how big I want the bunny to be, because it's going to sit behind the eggs as it doesn't have any feet from where it was sitting in the grass. The next tool I want to show you is the pen tool, which people always seem to find intimidating, but it really is not much of a big deal. We are going to zoom in to extract the eggs, but not quite everything. We are going to start here by not going into the details, because details are very fuzzy, and we're going to do that another way. And then we just click and drag, and if you want to make a sharp corner, you just click. In this fashion we can go around the eggs, like so. And if you find that a corner doesn't quite fit, you can hold down the Control key and just use it while you're repositioning your points. You can also with that reposition your handlebars. And what you can also do is, if you see that you have botched up something like this, and you need a point in the middle, just click in the middle, it will add a point, and then you can again use the Shift key to drag it outward. Now what I'm doing here is I'm also ignoring a small part of the bucket, some small part of the handle, because no one's going to get what it is anyway, and if it's in front of the bunny, later it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So I'm just going to ignore that part. When you're choosing where to cut something, it's always good to keep in mind what you will in the end see or not see in an image. You don't need to go by it pixel by pixel. It's so much work and it usually does not pay off. So if you're putting your path a little to the inside of your selection, it's probably going to be better than trying to actually fit it to every curve. Now to close the path, I'm going around everything and just going back to the beginning and clicking on the first point to close it. Now we have the work path here, and double click on it and name it something, because the work paths tend to disappear when you save. So to keep it in your paths palette, just rename it and it will save with the Photoshop document. Now we're going to click twice on the layer mask button to get a vector mask. The vector mask uses the path that we just created as a mask, and now we just put the bunny in the layer order below the eggs. Next, duplicate the egg layer by dragging it down to the new layer symbol and position it below everything else. Now what I'm going to do is delete the vector mask but leave the layer mask in place. Now before we continue, we're going to open our cloud stock. Just open it and drag it over into our document, rename it again with the name of the stocker, and then position it below everything else. Now click on the layer mask of the bottom egg layer and go over to choose the gradient tool, a linear gradient. I always set it to reverse, and I always use the color to transparent one. This way it will take the foreground color as the color that you're using. This way you can click first where you want it to be opaque, and then you finish where you want your layer to be invisible, and this way you get a very nice gradient type overlay. So before we continue, I'm going to adjust the background to fit better to the bunny. The way it is now, it's very big for this background. I think it could be a bit more cloudy, so I'm going to scale it down again, same as we did with the bunny, and reposition it. And now I see that I would like to flip it, so I unlink the layer and put a minus in front of the width, which will just flip it horizontally. Now this is composition wise better, I think. It has the clouds to the left and the bunny in front of the sky part. Next up, let's use a brush to fix our egg parts. Make sure that you're on the layer mask of the topmost layer, and then I'm going to show you the settings for my brush. It's a normal brush tip shape, just round one. Then the size, minimum diameter to 70%. The transfer controls, opacity and flow set to pen pressure. And basically, if you are on not on a tablet, then I would just suggest to leave the opacity and the flow set to normal and just tone down the opacity. Then just with this brush, I just adjust the size and the hardness, and that is basically it. And now we're going to use this brush on the mask and just brush away what we don't need. This way I can get very soft transitions and I have control over what I'm doing, and the gray values that will be present are basically used by the mask as values for transparency. So if you go in with black, pure black, it's going to be completely transparent, and if you go in with white, it's going to be completely visible. You can use the shortcut hitting X when you're on the brush tool to switch from foreground to background color, and if you have the foreground and background set to black and white, then in this case it's going to be a quick way to get from making things appear to making things disappear. When it comes to layer masks, there is another tip I would like to share. When you click on the chain link symbol, you can unlink the mask from the layer, and then you can use Ctrl T to transform the mask. In this case, I'm squishing it down to get less gradient into the background, and then you can reposition it the way you like it. Now, once you're done, of course at the top there's going to be some space that is not transparent anymore. Just use the gradient tool to fill it in. Next up, we're going to refine the mask's edge of the bunny. Make sure that you're on the layer mask and then hit mask edge at the top. And there you can see several sliders. The ones that are currently in there are still from the last time I used it. At the top you can see that you can choose what you're viewing in the background. Mostly it's on layers that you will want. This way you can see exactly what you're doing when you're pushing the sliders around. Now there's the refine radius tool, and when you go over the edges of your bunny with this tool, just paint it in, then you will find that you can bring back all those little tiny hairs that the bunny has that previously didn't get selected by the quick mask tool. Underneath the refine radius tool is also the erase refinements tool, in case you find that you have done too much. Now what you can see is that the little hairs are there, but they have like a halo around them, a dark one, because of the different background color. Now you can play with the sliders and see what makes a better edge. I usually shift the edge inward a bit and adjust the contrast, but it only helps so much. So what you can do is to check the box with the decontaminate colors in it, and if you crank up the slider you can see how the halo vanishes and you just are left with the white hair of the bunny. And then be sure to output to a new layer with a layer mask so that you still have the original, just in case something goes wrong. I'm now putting both into a new group. Just hit Ctrl G to get what you've selected in the layers palette into a new group. And now, just so you can see what can go wrong, I am disabling the layer mask, and there you can see that what it really does to your image. And this is why you might need the original. If you look at the eye that is on the right from us, this one, then you can also see how the refine edge tool didn't quite catch it. It was too close to the background color and it just didn't get that it should have left it there. So what I'm going to do to fix this is to make two parts of the bunny. The one that just worked out, I'm going to take out the ears and that eye and select that. And once it is selected, like this, I'm going to add the second group and then add a layer mask on the group. Control click on the mask to bring up the selection, go to select inverse to inverse it, and then hit the second group with the layer mask, so you have two parts now. And now you can delete the layer mask on the bunny's ears and add a new one a blank one, and this we can use to fix the ears. For this I'm going to choose a different brush, and in this case I'm going to use a brush that is actually made from clouds. I'm just going to use the brush to go around the edges of the ears, and I'm choosing this brush because it doesn't have a straight edge on the side. It's going to leave the ears kind of fuzzy, so I'm just going over, like you can see here. As for the kind of brush, you don't really need any cloud brush particularly. You can use a fur brush or anything else that just doesn't have a straight line. As said before, just keep your colors to black and white and use X to switch between them, and then just go around the whole bunny on full opacity. And of course this is going to be a bit more work when you're doing it with a mouse than with a tablet, but it should still work just fine. I used to do it like this as well before I had a tablet. Now when you're done going around once completely, you can use a little trick and alt click on the mask, so this way you can actually see what you have been painting, and then use just the normal brush and draw lines outward like this. You need to get one solid place to use the paint bucket on, like this. This way you can fill it with black, and if you leave any gaps, it's going to fill the bunny too. So this is basically, if it doesn't work at first, then you just have to do it again. And with the paint bucket, just click on the white place in the middle, and then click once or twice or 3 times to get a better effect. But then don't just click until it takes out all the edge that is still standing here, because if you do that, you're going to get a real sharp edge on the bunny's ears. But just do it a little to make your life easier, and then go in with the brush and remove the lines that are still there. And if you need the help of the mask itself, then just alt click on it. This way you can actually see what you're doing. It's quite nice, and you can see where the spots are that you missed. And because we made 2 groups, there is a small fine line between where the 2 groups meet, and this is here. It's very faint, but for me this is something that I just need to fix, so I'm going on the group layer of the top group and just painting over it to remove the seam. And this way you can also fix anything else that you may find that is still amiss. That is the nice thing actually when working with masks. You are not deleting anything, you're just hiding it, so if you find you made a mistake, you can go back anytime. To get basically one layer out of all of this that I can use, I'm going to convert this to a smart object. In this way you have an object, but you still have everything inside that you just did. If you double click on it like this, you can still see all the parts and change anything that you find is not working. Of course, the downside of this is if you have a very slow PC, then it's going to take up a lot of space and a lot of RAM, and it may make your PC very, very slow. So maybe then you will need to merge the layers or merge a copy. So what I'm showing you here at the moment is that when you change something in the group or in the smart object and save, then you will see it in the actual document, and as long as you don't save, you don't see anything. And this way it is also easy to track your changes. Next up, we're going to fix those harsh shadows that are coming from the original stock image. For this, I'm going to add a new layer, alt-click in between the two layers, and this way I can only work on the bunny and not overpaint into the background, because it's going to use the transparency of the bunny for my layer. Now I'm using the color picker to choose my color that I'm using. I'm just holding down the Alt key and picking something, and I'm, as you can see, again using the cloud brush because it's closer to the fur than anything else that I currently have, adding some highlights and shadows and just overpainting over the lines. So in this way the lines will vanish, and hopefully we're going to get closer to what we're trying to achieve. The same of course goes for the upper line, and as you can also see, I'm not using full opacity even though I'm on a tablet. The more unsure you are when painting, and I'm pretty unsure most of the time, the lower your opacity should be. So especially if you're working on a mouse, just use lower opacities and go over it more than once. It's time to get going on some more general lighting, and fortunately for us, the bunny is sitting behind the eggs and has already the light coming from the left or left back, mostly the same as the eggs and the sky, so there's nothing big there to fix. So what I'm going to do is to use the gradient tool, radial this time, and remove the reverse checkbox, and then I'm going to choose a color from the sky and then just get in here like this on a layer just above the clouds, because I want to change the atmosphere of the background a little. Now the color that I chose didn't look too good, so what I'm doing all the time is using hue saturation to fix this. You get it by hitting Control and U, and then you can see live what you're doing. That's also why I put the layer on soft light before I go in and change the color. So there you can see the changes I made, and basically I'm going in and doing the same more or less on the eggs, again clipping the layer so I'm only affecting the eggs and nothing below, and I'm using the same blue that I did earlier, setting it to soft light and then checking to see the effect, and then going into the hue saturation dialog to change it a bit. I want it a bit more purplish, violet-ish, but not too much, just so that it matches the background a little better. Light is always something that comes from everywhere, and these soft light gradient layers, they really help tying everything together. And of course you can also use the transform tool on them if you find that you need it bigger or repositioned or whatever. Then basically the same again for the bunny. Again clipping the layer. This time I chose a different color, now you can see how it looks on normal, and again set to soft light, and again with the hue saturation. Usually these are a bit too light if you are choosing it from the background, which is rather light in this case, and I just want the bunny to get a little of the color and not too much lighter than it already is, because it already has a very harsh lighting and a very light source on it anyway. So this is basically the first step. To tie it together even more, I'm going to add another layer above everything else, and here I'm going to try and get some more shadows in actually, and I'm not going to be very picky on where those shadows land. It may sound strange at first, but if you want something to be light on one side, then you need it to be dark on the other. So I'm going to set it here to multiply, and even though I'm going over everything, I promise you it's going to look good in the end still. The reason for this is probably that the whole thing needs some contrast, and it's not going to get any contrast if everything is the same light color and there is no darker spots. So I'm just going to put in with the radial gradient some darkness that ends up on the bunny on one side, even on the background, and especially on the foreground. And now you can also probably see that the foreground still feels a bit too light, if you think that the background is lit from behind. So I'm going to just take any color, use the layer on multiply again, use linear gradient, and then adjust the color and the hue. And again, you can Control T and bring up the transform menu and transform your layers, and again go into the hue saturation dialog if you still think that it doesn't fit. Basically just fiddle with it until you're satisfied. To make your bunny really pop, I'm going to use a layer style, and I know that a lot of people have prejudice against layer styles, but it all depends on how you use them. So what I usually have in there is my inner shadow is set to color dodge and a light yellowish color, and then I can use this to put on this spotlight more or less, and you fiddle with the distance and the size makes it smoother, and color dodge is a very aggressive blend mode, so you may want to set the opacity down so it's not too much. Using a layer style for this is just a quick fix, but it can give you some nice starting points. I would be rather careful with how much you use it, because it can look very unnatural very soon. I'm going back to using my soft round brush, and on low opacity also, with a light color, not very light, because I'm going to put it on overlay, and I'm going to brush in some highlights where I think the whole thing could use some glow, some sparkle. As you can see already, it's going to make the parts where I use it shine, and then of course you can adjust your brush size. And this is also something, you never need to be precisely right the first time. You just go over something and look at it, and if it's not good enough, then you can still add a layer mask or use the eraser to get rid of the parts that you really don't like. Now of course I'm again adjusting the hue and saturation, and now I'm going to add the layer mask and going over with my soft round brush to get rid of most of the glow again, because it's just way too much. But if you do it just a tiny bit, you don't see much, so For the tutorial, I think it needs to be a bit on the extreme side, at least at first. As you can see, I got rid of most of it on the layer mask, and now I'm going to show you how to really make it pop. I'm going to add a color dodge layer, and in this case you really don't want to go with the lightest color when you brush something in, and you probably want to lower the opacity somewhere to 20% or something, because otherwise the effect is just going to be very pronounced and way too much. So as you can see, I actually lowered the opacity to 13%, and now I'm going over the edges that I want to be glowing. And glow is always something that is not just located on whatever is glowing, but it's also coming out of or from the object that is glowing. So I'm going to go over the edges, and I'm going to deliberately go over the background as well. Also, I work zoomed out at first, just so I keep the bigger picture on my screen, and then in the end I go in like this and put some details in. And these details you will usually not really see in the finished version of my pieces, but you will in a sense that you don't see it pixel by pixel because it's too small to notice, but you would see it if it was missing. So this is basically what I'm doing often, and in this case I'm actually using the eraser and not a mask, just because I know that I need to get rid of most of this, and also I'm putting the eraser on low opacity so I can just get rid of what I don't want anymore. For the finishing touches, I usually go down to the adjustment layers, and well, in this case I chose levels to adjust the contrast of the piece. Just push in the sliders from the left and from the right, and you will see a noticeable difference. And then I decided I wanted to adjust some of the colors a little bit, so I chose the color balance adjustment, and here you can see how the sliders affect the image. And never forget that there's not just the midtones, but also the shadows and the highlights that you can work with. A small tip at the end, I really like to use contrasting colors for the shadows and the highlights. So if I go bluish for the shadows, I like to go to yellow for the highlights, and this way you can get some really nice effects. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!